Of the thousands of people who set out to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail each year, only 20 to 25% of those people will make it the entire 2,200-ish miles. So let's talk through why people quit and what you can do to ensure that you are not one of those people that is going to quit. Hey guys, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Audrey, known as Glow Stick on Trail. I thru-hiked the AT in 2018, loved every freaking second. And now I live in Colorado where I hike and backpack and share my adventures all the time. So if you're interested in the AT and hiking and backpacking in Colorado, be sure to hit the subscribe button. And for my returning viewers, as always, so happy to see you. Thank you for being here. To give you some numbers, according to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, 21,553 people have successfully completed the Appalachian Trail. Looking at some data from recent years, in 2018, the northbound and flip-flopper completion rate was only 19%. 19% of people who started out on thru-hike of the AT actually successfully completed it. And for southbounders, it was 26%. In 2017, those numbers were about the same. The northbound and flip-flopper completion rate was 19% and the southbound completion rate was 27%. In 2018, I was one of 1,128 people who successfully finished the trail. So proud of that, so proud of that. Ah. So why do people quit? I have no idea, because it was like the best experience of my life and I would just kill to do it again. But from my anecdotal experience, what I saw, people quit either because of injury, because they had a family emergency, because they ran out of money, or because they just plain didn't like it out there. I will note that obviously some people are definitely driven off by injury, but from what I saw, a lot of those people that quit because of injury weren't having the best time anyway. Obviously, that's not all people. Like, some people are driven off by injury and they're devastated by it. But it just kind of seemed to me that a lot of the people who were driven off for a certain reason, they already didn't really like it that much. And I definitely saw people who were running out of money or had minor injuries or things like that who continued on the trail and just found any way possible to stay there. So I really think that it all comes down to mindset at the end of the day. But let's look at some data on this and not just go off what I saw. In 2017, the Trek surveyed hikers who quit the trail, asking them, what took you off? Why? What happened? And here's what they found. 42% of these people said that it was major injury or illness that took them off the trail. 27% said it was a minor injury or physical problem. 15% said it was money, time, or a family issue. And 15% said it was mental fatigue or lack of interest. They just weren't interested anymore. I'm honestly surprised looking at these numbers that money wasn't higher up. I feel like I hear a lot of people talk about how they're running out of money and that's why they would get off the trail. Okay, so those are the reasons that people quit. So let's talk through some things that you can do to make sure that you are not one of the people that quits. So let's break this down. First of all, injury. Obviously, part of this is luck. The AT is a very wet trail. It is a rocky and rooty trail. There is some scrambling at certain points of the trail. So I definitely understand how people could get injured. Overuse injuries are super common, like knee issues, ankle issues, foot issues. I myself had some minor tendonitis in my ankle, which led to some pain for a little bit. I had some, wear and tear on my knees from years of running, but luckily my legs strengthened up and it was nothing that got me off the trail. I also know that a lot of people deal with plantar fasciitis. And I think when you're talking physical issues on the trail, the best thing that you can do to prepare yourself is to train ahead of time, lighten your load, don't carry things that you don't need with you, and take rest days when you need them. So my recommendation is, before you start a thru-hike, fill up that backpack, put all the stuff in there that you're gonna be carrying, including your food and water, everything like that, and get out there and carry your backpack everywhere. Go hiking with your backpack on long hikes before you start the trail. Get your body used to that extra weight. Start strengthening up your leg muscles. And if your load is feeling unbearable, find ways to cut down on what you're carrying. Find someone who has thru-hiked the trail in the past, ask them to give you a shakedown. Say, here's what I'm carrying. What do you think I don't need here? Look at your gear and think, what of this is old and heavy and what can I afford to replace to get something lighter? Don't bring things that you're not going to use. Go out on some shakedown hikes yourself before you actually start the trail. Go out for a weekend here and there. Find out what you're using and what you're not using, what's working and what's not. And if you find that there are things that you're not using, think to yourself like, hey, do I really need to be carrying this? Also, take care of your diet. Make sure you're getting enough protein. Make sure you're getting enough vitamins and minerals. Try to eat some, semi-nutritious things when you're out on the trail and not just junk food. Take care of your body. But seriously, if you need a rest, don't feel like you have to just push miles and push miles and push miles. I feel like that's a really common mindset for people to get in, like, oh, I can't stop because I have to push miles, or I have to be going at someone else's pace, or I have to keep up with this person. But that's not true, because that could be a detriment to you and your thru hike if you're pushing yourself harder than your body can handle and you're not giving your muscles the time to rest and repair. Also, in terms of preventing injury, I would recommend starting out slow. Your body has to get used to carrying all that weight, going up and over mountains all day, every day. The terrain down in Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee is pretty tough. I mean, I know that most people talk about how difficult the White Mountains in New Hampshire are and how difficult southern Maine is, but know that down south, at the beginning of the trail, for the first few hundred miles, it is also quite difficult. So give your body time to adjust to this new lifestyle and take it slow at the beginning. I was given some really great advice at the beginning to start slow, only go between like 8 and 12 miles a day to start out with and slowly build from there. And I really truly believe that that helped me prevent serious injury. And I would attribute that to being one of the reasons that I made it the entire way. You know your body better than anyone else. Treat it well, take care of it, take the rest you need, and definitely get in physical shape ahead of your hike. If you don't have places to hike around your area, then just go walk around town with your backpack, walk down your street with your backpack, get on the Stairmaster with your backpack, get on the treadmill at an incline with your backpack. Just get those muscles prepared. In terms of avoiding illness, I would also recommend going to see your doctor ahead of time, asking if there are any prescriptions that your doctor recommends that you bring out with you. Get a general health check to make sure everything looks good. Ask for some advice on how to stay healthy out in the wilderness. And also, make sure you're washing your hands all the time while you're out there, or at least using hand sanitizer, because germs spread very quickly out on the trail. Norovirus is common, for example, that's the stomach flu. Seeing if you might need any vaccines, for example, a tetanus booster is something that I got. And knowing the signs of Lyme disease, because I knew several people who got Lyme disease out on the trail, and it made them very, very sick when they first had it before they were able to be treated. So I actually knew several people who brought a course of antibiotics for Lyme out on the trail just in case, and I thought that seemed really smart. So maybe something to talk to your doctor about in order to avoid serious illness. Also, make sure you're filtering your water because you don't want to pick up any parasites. Okay, money issues. People hate it when I talk about the money that you need to complete a thru hike because they think that living in the woods should be free. But despite being in the woods for, 5 to 7 months when you're out on the trail, you still have to go to towns to get food, resupply. Some of your gear could break along the way. You might need to replace it. You're gonna have to pay to stay in hostels and hotels so that you can shower. You're gonna get sick of hiker food, I promise you that. And when you go to towns, sometimes you're gonna wanna eat at a restaurant. I thought going in I won't spend my money on that. Why would I do that? But guess what? You get very, very sick of hiker food. If you like beer, there are a lot of microbreweries along the way that you might find yourself spending money at. You might have to pay for shuttles. You're gonna have to pay to do laundry. You're gonna have to replace your shoes. You have a permit to buy to go through the Great Smoky Mountains. There are things out there that cost money. According to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the typical hiker spends about $1,000 per month while they're on trail. So if the average hiker is out there for 5 to 7 months, that's $5,000 to $7,000 of on-trail expenses. That doesn't include your gear. That doesn't include any expenses that you have back home. That doesn't include if you have an emergency and need to post up at a hostel or hotel for a few days while you recover from an injury or have to pay for a doctor bill. So I always recommend that people save at least $10,000 because that gives you the money you need for your on-trail plus a little cushion in case of emergencies and some money to start your life up back home. Honestly, I would even save up more money than that. But obviously that's totally up to you. But I just think that you need to think about these other expenses that you could end up incurring while you're out there, like in the case of emergency, or say something happens back home, you have to make a trip back home that you didn't prepare for. So just be extra prepared and don't just bring out the minimum amount of money that you think that you might need. You know, maybe this means you have to push your thru hike back by a year while you save up more money. And I think that's okay. I mean, you might not want to wait. I totally understand that. But I just think if you're really set on finishing the trail, you should be as prepared as possible. And that includes having extra money in savings. In terms of time, if you have a set amount of time to thru hike the trail, just know that it does generally take 5 to 7 months. And parts of the trail are more difficult than others. So if I only had a certain amount of time to hike the trail, I would start slow at the beginning. Again, that will help you to prevent injury. And then I would speed up kind of in the middle of the trail. Virginia is not flat, no matter what they say, but it is easier. It feels easier than the beginning of the trail, than Georgia, than North Carolina, than Tennessee, both because the terrain is not quite as difficult in most places, and also because your body is, really getting used to the trail, and you've gotten your trail legs by the time you get to Virginia, and you can really open up and start doing bigger days and going at a faster pace all through the mid-Atlantic. The mid-Atlantic is the easiest part of the trail, in my opinion. I would go faster. I would speed up my pace from between Virginia up to Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, things start getting more difficult again. There are lots of climbs in Vermont, and then New Hampshire, southern Maine. Most difficult parts of the trail, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other people, especially the Whites, New Hampshire. Those killed me. Oh my gosh, my hiker hunger ramped up so high, kind of crazy. So you are definitely gonna end up being slowed down probably in those areas, in the Whites and southern Maine. So just plan for that. Know that you gotta do probably some extra miles in the mid-Atlantic to make up for that. Family concerns and family emergencies. Obviously, again, this is probably luck. You really can't know if something is gonna happen back home, but I would just say prepare for it monetarily in case you do have to go back home so that those extra costs don't eat into your thru hiking fund. And finally, mental fatigue and loss of interest. This is probably the toughest one to overcome because if you wanna be out there, you will find a way to be out there. But if you're not feeling it in your mind, that's really tough. But here's some things that I did to prepare ahead of time, which I think could really help you. I was afraid that I was going to get bored out there. And so I thought, okay, how can I cut down on the boredom if that does happen? And so what I did was I downloaded a ton of music, a ton of podcasts, and some audiobooks ahead of time so that when I was having a tough day, I could distract myself. So I Googled what are the best podcasts of 2018? Because I had gone in 2018 and I found a bunch and I just listened to an episode ahead of time and I thought, this podcast seems really interesting. I think it could really entertain me. And I went to those podcasts that I was these are resonating with me, and found some episodes that I was those sound really interesting. And I downloaded a bunch of them. I also bought a membership to Audible, which is Amazon's audiobooks. And I downloaded a couple of books ahead of time that I was these sound really interesting and entertaining. I bet these will take me out of my head on the trail. And when I was having those tough days, I would listen to the podcast. I would listen to the books. I would listen to the music that I downloaded. And at some point, my trail family even started a Tramily book club. So we were all listening to the same audiobook at the same time. We would talk about it on our, our rests during the day, like our lunch break. We would talk about it at camp. And it made it really, really fun. Honestly, there were not many times at all that I found myself bored. I got into just a really amazing trail family and we kind of all entertained each other. And plus, I found that when I'm doing copious amounts of exercise outdoors, my brain just sort of shuts off and gets very zen, and I could just zone out for, miles at a time and just be these beautiful flowers, these beautiful trees, and not really think about much, which was beautiful. I loved it. But you do have those tough days, so just have a plan in advance for how you're gonna get through those. Maybe find yourself a support system back home, like a certain friend who you can call if you're having a tough day, and they will encourage you to stay on the trail and get through whatever it is you're going through. And finally, I read Zach Davis's book Ahead of Time, Appalachian Trails, which really encourages you to write down your why. Why are you going out on the trail? What are you gonna miss out on if you leave? What are you most excited for? Things like that, just to get very mentally prepared to hike the AT. So his book might be a good resource for you on mentally preparing. I actually found that I didn't really need his tips once I was out on the trail because I loved the experience so much. But I do hear a lot of people say that they got a ton of value out of it. So that might be something to look into. And I'll drop a link to that down in the show notes. And also some really common advice that I think is like pretty fantastic is don't quit on a bad day. Don't quit when it's raining, don't quit when you're cold, don't quit when you're hungry. Make sure you're in a good mental state before you make that decision. So those are my suggestions. If you have thru-hiked the AT or another trail in the past, and you also have suggestions on how not to be one of the people that quits, let me know down in the show notes. Guys, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and check me out over on Instagram at AudiePayne. As always, thanks so much for being here. Talk to you later.